Tonight we cast off from the known world, drifting silently through the mists of history to follow Leif Erikson's longship toward the forgotten shores of Vinland. But first, come in from the cold. Leave the howling wind outside. You are safe here, deep within the library. The fire is crackling just for you, and the shadows here are friendly. The volume for this tale is already waiting on the desk. It is heavy, bound in rough, weathered leather that smells of salt spray and old cedar. Let us unlatch the iron clasp and open to the first page. Our story begins. The wind here does not merely blow, it scours. It is a living, breathing entity that sweeps down from the great white shoulders of the glaciers, carrying with it the memory of ice that has not melted in 10,000 years. Can you hear it? It whistles through the chinks in the turf walls of Brattahlíð, a low, mournful note that vibrates in the very marrow of your bones. Here, at the edge of the known world, the silence is heavy. It presses against the ears like water, broken only by the crackle of the hearth fire and the shifting of timber as the longhouse settles into the frozen earth. We are in the shadow of Eric the Red. Even when he is not in the room, his presence hangs in the air, thick as the smoke from the seal oil lamps. He is the stone foundation of this place, the rough-hewn architect of Greenland. You can smell him in the leather hangings, the scent of wet wool, iron, and the dried blood of the hunt. He carved this existence out of the rock and the frost, a pagan king in a land of white desolation. But the light is changing in the north. The fire in the central hearth burns low, casting long, dancing shadows that stretch across the beaten earth floor, reaching for Leif. Leif Erikson stands apart, a silhouette against the glowing embers. He is cut from the same cloth as his father, broad-shouldered, with hands that know the rough bite of a rope and the smooth haft of an axe. But there is a different storm brewing behind his eyes. He touches the silver hammer of Thor at his father's neck in his memory, but his own fingers brush against something cold and foreign against his chest. A cross. The dilemma is not a battle of swords, but a war of whispers. It is the friction between the old gods, who demand blood and thunder, and the white Christ, whom Leif brought back from the court of King Olaf Tryggvason. Can you imagine the weight of that silence? The tension is palpable, a taut string ready to snap. The old man, Eric, sits in his high seat, his eyes clouded but sharp, watching his son with the suspicion of a wolf watching a stranger. He sees the change. He smells the incense of the south clinging to Leif's cloak, a scent that fights with the salt and the pine. Leif looks to the west, beyond the thick walls of turf and stone, beyond the fjord that glitters like black glass under the starlight. There is an emptiness that calls to him. It is a pull as strong as the moon dragging the tide. He has heard the stories. We have all heard them, whispered over cups of mead when the winter nights stretch on for weeks. The tales of Bjarni Herjolfsson, who drifted off course and saw lands of wood and hills, low-lying and green, but never stepped ashore. That refusal to land haunts life. It is a ghost story of unfulfilled destiny. He steps out of the longhouse, and the cold hits him like a physical blow. It steals the breath from his lungs and crystallizes on his beard instantly. The snow crunches under his boots, a sound like breaking sugar. He walks down the slope toward the water, away from the suffocating heat of his father's legacy, toward the freedom of the freezing sea. Down by the water's edge the ships are sleeping. They are dark beasts pulled up onto the shingle, covered in frost that glitters like diamond dust. Here the smell is overpowering, the sharp, intoxicating aroma of pine tar, pitch and brine. It is the perfume of adventure. Leif moves among them, a ghost in the grey twilight. He is not looking for a longship, a dragon of war meant for speed and raiding. The Atlantic is not a river to be raided, it is a monster to be survived. He needs a Nor. He stops before the vessel that belonged to Bjarni. It is not slender or graceful like the ships that terrorize the coasts of England. It is broad, deep-bellied, and sturdy, a workhorse of the waves. Leif runs his gloved hand along the hull. Even through the leather he can feel the strength of the oak. The planks are lap strakes, overlapping like the scales of a fish, riveted together with iron that has rusted to the colour of dried blood. The wood is rough, textured by the adze that shaped it, scarred by the ice of previous voyages. This is the silent auction. There are no crowds here, no shouting merchants, no clinking of coins. There is only the transaction of fate. Leif stands in the shadow of the curved prow, looking up at the sheer height of the gunwales. He is judging its soul. He imagines the hold filled not with warriors, but with cattle, timber, dried fish, and fresh water. He imagines the groaning of the wood as it climbs a mountain of green water in the deep ocean. He presses his ear against the hull. The wood whispers back. It tells him of the storms it has already weathered, the salt it has absorbed until the timber itself is cured like meat. It feels solid, immovable, a piece of the earth that has learned to float. This ship has seen the land he seeks. It knows the way. The purchase is made in the quiet of his mind before a single word is spoken to Bjarni. It involves the trading of silver, yes, heavy arm rings twisted from precious metal, but the true cost is the commitment. To take this ship is to turn his back on the safety of Brattahlíð, to step out of Eric's shadow and cast his own upon a world that has no name. He walks to the stern and places a hand on the steering oar. It is smooth from use, polished by the sweat and oil of many hands. The wood is cold, soaking up the chill of the night, but under Leif's palm begins to warm. He breathes in deeply, filling his lungs with the freezing air, tasting the salt spray that hangs suspended in the wind. The conversion to the new faith has given him a mission, but the call of the West gives him a purpose. The Nor waits. The water laps gently against the stones, a rhythmic, hypnotic sound, counting down the moments until the ice breaks and the prow turns toward the sunset. The decision is etched into the frost. The inheritance of Eric the Red is the land of Greenland, but Leif's inheritance is the horizon, and the horizon is endless. Listen closely now. Lean in until your ear is pressed against the rough, curved belly of the ship. Do you hear it? It is not a silence, nor is it a noise. It is a conversation. A ship, you see, is never truly still, and it is never truly dead. The moment the axe severed the tree from its roots in the deep Norwegian forests, the wood began a second life, one bound not to the earth, but to the sea. This vessel, this Nor, is a creature of oak and pine, and it speaks in a language of groans and whispers. It is a living thing. When the wind presses against the mast, you can feel the tension run through the keel like a shiver down a spine. The overlapping planks, the lap-strake hull that is the genius of the Northmen, do not fight the water rigidly. They flex, they breathe. Imagine the sound of 1,000 subtle movements. As the hull settles into the fjord's embrace, the iron rivets that bind the planks together shift in their wooden sockets. It is a rhythmic creak, sigh, creak, sigh. It sounds like an old man settling into a heavy chair, or perhaps the slow, deep breathing of a sleeping whale. This is the music of survival. A rigid ship would snap in the violence of the Atlantic, but this ship yields. It accepts the pressure of the waves, absorbs the shock into its very fibers, and transforms the energy into forward motion. Run your hand along the gunwale. Feel the vibration. It is a low hum that travels up through the soles of your boots and settles in your chest. The wood remembers the wind that once shook its branches, and now it trembles with the anticipation of the waves. Every timber has a voice. The sturdy oak of the keel grumbles low and deep, the anchor of the song, while the lighter pine of the upper strake sings a higher, tighter note as the rigging pulls taut. To the untrained ear it might sound like the ship is breaking apart, but to Leif and to the men who will entrust their lives to this wooden shell, it sounds like a heartbeat. It is the sound of the ship holding them, cradling them against the chaotic indifference of the deep. And then there is the smell. It is an atmosphere so thick, so heavy, that you can taste it on the back of your tongue. Before the ship even leaves the harbour, the air around it is transformed. It does not smell of the land, of the damp turf, the sheep, or the hearth smoke of Brattahlíð. It smells of the journey, Breathe in. The first thing that hits you is the pine tar. It is sharp, medicinal, and overwhelmingly dark. It is the blood of the forest, distilled and burned, then slathered thick over every inch of the hull to seal it against the rot. It smells of ancient fires and sticky resin. It clings to everything. If you brush against the mast, the scent will stay on your clothes for weeks. If you touch the ropes, the sticky blackness will seep into the calluses of your hands and remain there until the skin sheds. It is a comforting scent, for it is the smell of waterproofing, the smell of a barrier between the warm blood of the crew and the freezing death of the water. But beneath the sharp, high note of the tar is the low, pervasive bass note of the salt. This is not the delicate salt of the kitchen table. This is the brine of the deep ocean, cured into the wood over years of voyages. It has soaked into the deck planks until they are bleached white and hard as bone. You can smell the kelp that has dried in the crevices of the floorboards, a musky, organic scent that speaks of the creatures moving in the dark depths below. The air inside the hull is a complex perfume of confinement. It smells of wet wool, the cloaks of the sailors, heavy with dampness, never truly dry. It smells of old leather, of oil used to keep the tools from rusting, and of the faint metallic tang of the iron anchor chain. It is a scent that clears the sinuses and stings the eyes, a sensory warning that comfort has been left behind. To stand on this deck is to inhale the essence of preservation. Just as the salt cures the fish, it seems to cure the men, pickling them in the brine until they are as tough and weathered as the figurehead itself. The ship breathes, it smells of the wild, but now it must be given its body. A ship without cargo is a cork, bobbing foolishly on the surface at the mercy of every gust. It needs weight to fight the sea. It needs the ballast of survival. Watch as the men form a chain from the storehouse to the jetty. The loading is a solemn ritual, a silent calculation of months measured in weight. They pass the dried cod, the stockfish. These are not soft, fresh fish. They are stiff as boards, dried in the freezing wind until they are light, hard, and nearly indestructible. They are stacked like firewood in the hold. Rough to the touch, their skin like sandpaper, they smell intensely of concentrated ocean. Hundreds of them, thousands. This is the fuel for the engine of human muscle. Leif watches the waterline. With every bundle of fish thrown into the belly of the ship, the hull sinks a fraction of an inch deeper. Then came the vats of Skrælingar, great wooden barrels bound with willow hoops, filled with the thick, sour curd. It is heavy, dense food, a memory of the summer pastures packed away for the dark times. The barrels land with a heavy thud on the deck, and the ship groans in response, accepting the burden. And finally, the water, the most precious weight of all. They do not carry casks, for casks can shatter in a storm. They carry skins, leather sacks made from the hides of cattle and seals, sewn tight and sealed with pitch. When the men heave them onto their shoulders, you can hear the liquid sloshing inside, a chaotic, fluid weight that fights against the carrier. They are piled low in the hull, right against the keel to keep the center of gravity deep. With every skin, every barrel, every bundle of fish, the ship changes. It settles. The high, flighty roll of the empty vessel disappears, replaced by a sluggish, heavy stability. The waterline creeps up the side of the strakes, drinking in the shadow of the hull. You can feel the physics of it changing under your feet. The Nor is no longer floating on the water. It is sitting in it. It has become a part of the sea's architecture. The groaning of the timbers deepens. The pitch of the ship's voice drops an octave. It is heavy now, pregnant with the hope of survival. The keel digs deep into the cold green water, gripping the sea, ready to hold its course against the chaotic will of the North Atlantic. The ship is no longer just a vehicle. It is a floating fortress, a larder, a home. It is ready. Close your eyes. Imagine for a moment that you are the captain of a vessel bound for the edge of the world. You stand at the steering oar, the salt drying tight on your skin, and you look down for guidance. In our time, you would expect to see a chart, a crisp sheet of parchment or paper, covered in the delicate spiderweb ink of cartography. You would look for lines of latitude, for compass roses, for the reassuring geometry of the known. But here, on the deck of the Nor, there is nothing. Look at your hands. They are empty. There are no maps in this world. The North Atlantic has not yet been flattened into ink and paper. It is too wild, too vast to be captured in a drawing. To the Norse, a map would be a foolish thing, a static lie told about a shifting, breathing world. How can you draw a line for a current that moves like a serpent? How can you sketch the wind? Instead of looking down, the Norse sailor looks up. He looks out. The map is not an object. It is a sensation. It is etched into the mind, a mnemonic poem of landmarks and signs passed from father to son in the low, murmuring voices of the winter hearth. Sail west, they whisper, until the mountains of Norway sink beneath the sea. Then hold the course until the birds of the Faroes appear. When the sky is clear, the sun is the only compass they need. But the north is a jealous mistress, often veiling the sun in thick grey wool. In these moments, Leif might reach into a pouch at his belt and withdraw a smooth, cloudy stone, a sunstone. It is a piece of calcite, cool to the touch, like holding a piece of frozen fog. Even when the sun is hidden, he holds the crystal up to the grey sky, rotating it slowly, so slowly. He is waiting for the magic of the light, the polarization. When the crystal turns dark, when it catches the invisible angle of the hidden sun, he knows where the true south lies. It is navigation by a trick of the light, a secret shared between the stone and the sky, but mostly they navigate by feeling the earth turn beneath them. They feel the swell of the ocean against the hull. A long rolling swell from the southwest tells a different story than a choppy, nervous chop from the east. The helmsman does not just steer, he reads the water with the soles of his feet. He feels the rhythm of the Atlantic, sensing the distant storms days before they arrive, reading the lost maps written in the heave and sigh of the ocean's surface. They called the ocean the Whale Road. It is a beautiful, haunting word, isn't it? It implies that the sea is not a barrier, but a highway, a path worn smooth by the giants of the deep. And for Leif and his crew, this is literally true. They are not sailing into a void, they are following the ancient commuters of the sea. Stand at the gunwale and look down. The water here is not uniform. It is a canvas of shifting blues and greens, a color-coded message for those who know how to read it. Out here in the deep abyssal plains of the Atlantic, the water is a terrifying inky blue, almost black. It looks thick, heavy, like oil. This is the color of the deep ocean, where the bottom is miles below, a darkness that swallows the light. But watch. As the days stretch into weeks, the color begins to change. Perhaps you see a lighter ribbon of turquoise threading through the black, a current, or perhaps the water turns a murky, churning green. This is the sign of life. It means plankton. It means fish. And where there are fish, there are whales. Suddenly the silence of the horizon is broken by a plume of mist, a white geyser shooting up against the grey sky. There, a smooth dark back rolls through the surface, slick and massive as an island rising from the depths. Then another, and another. The pilot whales, the humpbacks, the minkies, they are migrating. They know where the land lies. Their ancestors have swum these paths since the ice retreated. Leif watches them with a reverence we can barely understand. He steers the ship into their wake. If the whales are moving west with purpose, he follows. They are the shepherds of the ocean. They know where the currents are warm, where the feeding grounds rise up from the shelf. To follow the whale road is to place your trust in a biological compass that is millions of years old. And there are other signs in the water, smaller, more intimate. The crew watches for driftwood. A branch of birch, stripped of its bark, bobbing in the swell, is a letter from a distant shore. Seaweed, tangled and brown, drifting in a line, marks the edge of a current that might lead to an island. Even the temperature tells a story. A sailor might lean over the side, plunging his bare arm into the freezing water up to the elbow. He is feeling for the blood of the ocean, A sudden pocket of warmth amidst the ice melt suggests the Gulf Stream, the great river within the sea that acts as a conveyor belt to the west. They are reading the body of the ocean, tracing its veins and arteries, letting the water itself carry them home. But then the fog comes. It does not roll in. It simply erases the world. One moment you can see the horizon. The next, the universe ends at the tip of your nose. The Niflheim mist. It is cold, damp, and suffocating. It muffles the sound of the wind and dampens the creaking of the ropes. In this white void, the sunstone is useless. The stars are gone. The colour of the water is lost in the gloom. The eyes are blind. Now, the ship must navigate by ears alone. This is the time of the listener's watch. A single man is sent to the prow of the ship, the furthest point forward, hanging out over the dark water. He is chosen not for his strength, but for his silence. He pulls his hood back. He closes his eyes, for they are deceiving him now. He grips the forestay to steady himself, and he tunes the world out. He is listening to the sound of the land. It is a subtle, complex symphony. The open ocean hisses. It has a long, white noise breath. But land disrupts the flow. Land echoes. He listens for the surf. The sound of deep ocean swells hitting a rock face is a low, booming thunder, a whump, whump, that reverberates through the fog for miles. It is the sound of death for a wooden ship. If he hears that deep bass note, he screams a warning to the helmsman to come about. He listens for the birds. This is a delicate distinction. The cry of a shearwater or a fulmar means nothing. Those birds wander the open ocean for months. They are spirits of the deep. But the cry of a puffin, the shriek of a guillemot, these are coastal birds. They do not venture far from their cliffs. If the listener hears the frantic, high-pitched chatter of a puffin colony through the mist, he knows land is near, perhaps only a few miles away, and he listens for the silence. This is the strangest sign of all. Sometimes, when a ship approaches a large landmass in the fog, the wind suddenly dies. The heavy swells of the ocean smooth out, blocked by the invisible island. The ship enters a lee, a pocket of calm. The sudden absence of the wind's roar, the sudden levelling of the deck, that physical quiet is the loudest shout the land can make. The listener stands there, hours on end, his beard dripping with condensation, his mind focused on the invisible geometry of sound. He is the ship's sonar. Upon his ability to distinguish the crash of a wave on a rock from the crash of a wave on the open sea rest the lives of 30 men. He stands in the grey nothingness, waiting for the whisper that says, "You have arrived." Time out here ceases to be a straight line. On land you measure your life by the ringing of church bells, the length of shadows, or the passing of seasons. But in the middle of the Atlantic there is only water. It is a world of fluid repetition, a blue purgatory that washes away the memory of solid ground. They call it wave iron. It is the hardening of the spirit that comes from staring at the same moving image for days, weeks, a month. Stand at the rail, look out. The horizon is a perfect unbroken circle of steel grey. There is no beginning and no end. From the moment the sun bleeds its pale, watery light into the eastern sky at dawn, until it sinks like a drowning coin in the west, the view does not change. It creates a trance. You watch a swell rise, a mountain of water, dark and heavy, capped with a lace of white foam. It lifts the ship, holding it suspended for a breathless second, and then drops it into the trough. Rise, fall, rise, fall. It is the breathing of a god. The rhythm becomes so deeply ingrained in your body that you stop feeling it. You no longer stumble when the deck tilts. Your knees bend automatically, compensating for the roll before it even happens. You become part of the gyroscope, but it is the eyes that suffer most. They crave a fixed point, a tree, a rock, a roof line, but the ocean denies them. There is only the texture of the water. You begin to see patterns in the chaos. You watch the way the wind combs the tops of the waves into streaks of spume that look like combed wool. You watch the colour shift from the opaque, terrifying black of midnight to the bruised purple of twilight, and finally to the hard, bright cobalt of noon. It is hypnotic. Men have been known to stare into the wake, the churning white scar the ship leaves behind. For hours, their minds completely empty, their souls scoured clean by the relentless motion. The sound is a constant white noise roar, a rushing of water that never pauses to take a breath. It is a lullaby that can drive a man to madness or to a deep, meditative peace. This is the forge of the ocean. It hammers the mind until it is as smooth and hard as a pebble on the beach. The sun reaches its zenith, a pale eye staring down through the haze. The belly tightens. It is time to break the trance. It is time for the dagmal, the day meal. There is no feasting hall here. There are no roasting spits dripping with fat, no horns overflowing with ale. There is only the huddled warmth of the crew in the lee of the gunwale, sheltered from the biting wind. The distribution of food is a sacred, quiet ritual. It is the only punctuation mark in the long sentence of the day. A wooden bowl is passed. Into your hand is placed a strip of dried mutton or stockfish. Hold it in your hand. It is hard as wood, light as paper. It has been cured in the wind until every drop of moisture has been stolen from it. It smells of the smokehouse and the salt air. You do not eat this quickly. You cannot. To eat this food requires patience. You place the strip in your cheek, letting it sit there, letting the warmth of your mouth slowly soften the fibers. It tastes of salt, sharp, stinging salt, and the deep, gamey flavour of the sheep. You chew slowly. Every bite is a battle. Your jaw works rhythmically, mirroring the roll of the ship. There is a strange satisfaction in it, a primal connection to the act of survival. Alongside the meat, perhaps there is a piece of flatbread, hard and brittle, that snaps with a sound like a dry twig breaking. And then the water. The skin is passed around. You uncork it, and the smell of wet leather wafts up. You take a sip. The water is cool, but it tastes of the hide. It is stale, flat, and infinitely precious. You do not gulp. You let the liquid coat your throat, washing away the brine that cakes your lip. You drink exactly your share, no more, no less. There is very little talking. What is there to say? The ocean has already said it all. The men eat in a companionable silence, shoulder to shoulder, their eyes downcast or fixed on the deck planks. They are sharing more than food. They are sharing the fragile warmth of their bodies against the vast, indifferent cold. The sound of chewing, the creak of the ship, the whistle of the wind in the rigging. This is the soundtrack of their communion. It is a humble sacrament, a reminder that they are still creatures of flesh and blood, needing sustenance, suspended over a world that offers none. When the last crumb is eaten and the water skin is stowed away, the afternoon stretches out, a long grey road of time that must be travelled. Idleness is dangerous. A mind left to wander on the open sea will wander into dark places. It will remember the warmth of the hearth left behind, the faces of wives and children, the terror of the unknown destination. And so the hands must work. This is the quiet handwork. It is the tether that keeps the men sane. Scattered around the deck, finding patches of sunlight or shelter, the men withdrew small tools from their belts. Here, a man sits cross-legged, a piece of driftwood in his lap. He holds a small knife, the blade worn thin and sharp. Scrape, scrape, scrape. He is carving a toggle for a rope, or perhaps a game piece for Hnefataful. He watches the curl of the wood shaving as it peels away, pale and clean against the dark, weathered grain. He focuses entirely on the angle of the blade. If he slips, he bleeds, and blood attracts sharks, they say. So he is careful. The world shrinks down to the point of his knife. He is not in the middle of the Atlantic. He is in the microcosm of the wood. Another man is tending to the sail. The great woolen square, the wadmal, takes a beating from the gale. It frays, it stretches. He sits with a bone needle and a spool of waxed linen thread. He pushes the needle through the thick lanolin-rich fabric. Push, pull, tighten. It is a rhythmic motion, almost like weaving a spell. He is mending the wings of the ship. He smells the sheep smell of the damp wool, a scent of the farm in the middle of the wilderness. Others are splicing rope, their fingers dancing through the intricate geometry of hemp and horsehair. They twist the fibers, tucking them under and over, creating loops that will hold fast against the fury of a storm. This busy work is not just maintenance, it is meditation. It creates a small, controllable order in a universe of chaos. By focusing on the stitching of a seam or the carving of a pin, the sailor exerts his will over his environment. He says, "I am here. I am making this. I am still a man, not just a ghost on the water." The hours bleed away. The sun dips lower. The chips of wood pile up on the deck like snow. The sail is patched. The rope is spliced. And as the light fails, the men put away their tools, their minds calm, their hands tired, ready to face the long, dark watch of the night. They have survived another day of the endless rhythm. They have forged themselves against the wave iron, and they are stronger for it. The ocean does not give up its secrets willingly. For days the horizon has been a blur of grey water meeting grey sky, a seam so faint it feels like a trick of the eye. But then the texture of the world changes. The rolling, fluid chaos of the Atlantic abruptly hardens. A line appears, jagged, dark, and utterly indifferent, land. But this is not the soft, green embrace the stories promised. As the Nor creeps closer, fighting the cold currents that swirl down from the Arctic, the details emerge from the mist. There are no trees waving in the wind. There are no soft dunes of sand. There is only stone. Listen to the sound of the landing. It is not the soft hiss of a keel sliding onto a sandy beach. It is a grinding, bone-shaking crunch. The ship shudders as it kisses the bottom. The men leap over the gunwales, splashing into the freezing surf, their breath pluming in the air like smoke. But when their boots find purchase, they do not sink into earth. They strike rock. We are standing on the edge of what you know as Baffin Island, but to Leif it is an alien planet. Look down at your feet. The shore is not made of pebbles. It is paved. Massive, flat slabs of rock stretch out in every direction, fitting together like the scales of a titanic beast or the floor of a giant's hall. These are the Hella, the flat stones. They are smooth, cold, and grey, polished by 10,000 years of ice and wind. They are slick with the spray of the sea. To walk here is to walk on the spine of the world. There is a hollow, clacking sound as 30 men move across the beach. Clack, clack, clack. It echoes in the stillness. The air here is different. It is thin, sharp, and incredibly clean. It smells of pulverized rock and ancient ice. It is a sterile scent. There is no rot, no life, no smell of soil or blooming flowers. There is only the mineral tang of the stone and the salt of the sea. Leif kneels. He places a gloved hand on one of the great slabs. It sucks the heat from his palm instantly. He runs, his fingers over the surface. It feels like iron, unyielding and brutal. This is a land that does not want them. It is a fortress of solitude, guarding the north against the intrusion of warm blood. The sensory deprivation is almost overwhelming. After the constant motion and noise of the ocean, the stillness of these stones is heavy. It presses against the ears. It is the silence of a tomb. They venture further up the beach, away from the comfort of the ship's wooden hull, moving inland. The landscape reveals itself not as a home, but as a warning. Leif looks up, scanning the interior. Between the shore and the mountains there is nothing. No grass, no brush, no timber to repair a ship or build a fire. It is a canvas of desolation. In the distance, the high country rises up, not in jagged peaks, but in great white domes, glaciers. They hang heavy on the shoulders of the mountains, massive rivers of ice that have frozen in mid-flow. They glitter with a pale blue inner light, cold and radiant. The wind that blows down from them carries the bite of the eternal winter. It howls through the gaps in the rocks, a low, mournful note that sounds like a wolf crying for a lost pack. This is a world of rock and ice. The colours are strictly rationed. The grey of the slate, the white of the snow, the black of the deep shadows, and the steel blue of the sky. To a Norseman, whose life depends on wood for his ships, grass for his cattle, and iron for his weapons, this place is poverty incarnate. It is useless. It is beautiful, yes, in the way a weapon is beautiful, but it is dead. Leif stands in the centre of this vast amphitheatre of stone. He feels the weight of his father's legacy, Eric the Red, who found a land of green fjords. Leif has found a quarry. The men stand around him, their cloaks pulled tight, shivering not just from the cold, but from the eeriness of the place. They look at the fox tracks in the dusting of snow, tiny prints that wind between the boulders, and realize they are the only living things larger than a scavenging beast to stand here. Leif speaks, his voice low, swallowed instantly by the wind. He does not shout a proclamation of conquest. He simply names the reality. I shall give a name to this land, he whispers to the frost, and it shall be called Helluland, land of flat stones. It is not a name of affection. It is a label on a map of hazards. It is a recognition that the stories of Bjarni were true, but that the truth is hard. He looks at the rock one last time, imprinting the bleak geography into his mind. This is a place to be remembered, so that it can be avoided. It is a landmark, a milestone on the road to somewhere else. It is the first step, but it cannot be the last. There is a moment of hesitation that hangs over every explorer. The ship is safe on the shore. The men are tired. The ocean is a monster they have just escaped. It would be easy to stay for a day, to rest on these cold stones, to sleep on solid ground, even if that ground is as hard as iron. But Leif Erikson is not a tourist. He is a man possessed by the idea of the green land. He looks at the ship resting on the shingle. The tide is turning. The water is beginning to creep back up the stones, lifting the hull gently, rocking it like a cradle. Creak, splash, creak. The Nor is eager to leave. It does not belong here among the rocks. Leif turns his back on the glaciers. He turns his back on the flat stones that stretch out like a highway to nowhere. He looks south. The wind has shifted. Can you feel it? A subtle change in the air pressure. The breeze is coming from the north now, a pushing wind, a wind that wants to carry them away. It tugs at the fur of his hood. It whistles through the rigging of the ship, singing a song of departure. He does not make a speech. There is no need for rousing words when the cold is biting at your nose and the land offers no shelter. He simply catches the eye of his helmsman. He nods. It is a small gesture, barely visible, but it carries the weight of history. That single, unyielding nod sets the machinery of the voyage back in motion. Launch, the order is passed down the line in a murmur. The men move with sudden energy, eager to put the desolation of Helluland behind them. They put their shoulders to the strakes. They grunt with effort. Heave. The ship scrapes over the flat stones, a harsh, grinding farewell, and slides back into the water. They wade out, waist deep in the freezing surf, and haul themselves aboard. The smell of the stone fades, replaced once again by the smell of tar and salt. The sail is hoisted. The great woolen square unfurls with a snap like a cracking whip, catching the northern wind. The yardarm groans as it takes the strain. Leif stands at the stern, watching the grey coast recede. The flat stones merge back into a single dark line, and then, as the mist rolls in again, they vanish. Helluland is gone, returned to its silence. The bow points south, cutting through the white caps. The decision is made. They will not settle for the rock. They will sail until the world turns green. The nose is a creature of habit. After days, weeks, a month on the open Atlantic, the sense of smell begins to die. It is drowned in the brine. You stop smelling the salt because the salt is everything. It is the air you breathe, the water you drink, the crust on your skin. The world becomes olfactory monochrome, a single, sharp, metallic note of the deep sea, occasionally punctuated by the reek of wet wool or the tar of the ship's hull. But then The wind shifts. It happens miles before the eyes confirm the truth. We are south of the flat stones now, south of the ice. The Nor is cutting through waters that feel less angry, less jagged. Leif stands at the prow, his eyes narrowed against the glare. But it is not his sight that alerts him. It is a breath. The wind coming off the land is warm, and it is heavy. It carries a scent so rich, so complex, and so forgotten that it hits the men like a physical blow. It is the smell of resin. Close your eyes and breathe it in. It is the sweet, sharp, intoxicating aroma of balsam fir and black spruce. It is the smell of millions of needles baking in the sun, releasing their essential oils into the air. It is a green smell to men who have lived in the stone halls of Greenland, where the only wood is the grey, skeletal driftwood cast up on the beach. This scent is a hallucination. Underneath the high, sharp note of the pine, there is something deeper. The smell of earth, not the frozen tundra or the sterile rock dust of Helluland, but living, breathing soil. Loam. It is the scent of rotting leaves, of damp moss, of mushrooms pushing up through the decay. It is the smell of life consuming itself and being reborn. It is a thick, musk-like perfume that speaks of summer, of shadows, of deep roots drinking from hidden springs. The crew crowds the rail, inhaling greedily. They are drinking the air. You can see the tension leaving their shoulders. The salt-hardened lines around their eyes soften. This scent triggers a primal memory of the Norwegian homelands they left behind generations ago. It promises shelter. It promises fire that burns bright and hot. It promises a land that is not trying to kill them. When the coast finally materializes from the haze, it is not a grey line of stone. It is a long white ribbon of sand, miles of it, backed by a wall of darkness. But it is a living darkness. It is a forest. A dense, impenetrable blanket of green that stretches from the dunes to the horizon, rising and falling with the land like a green sea frozen in time. The keel grinds into the white sand, soft, yielding sand this time, not the bone-shattering rock of the north. The men tumble over the sides, splashing through the surf, but they do not drop to their knees to kiss the ground. They run to the trees. To understand the emotion of this moment, you must understand the poverty of Greenland. In Leif's home, a tree is a myth. A plank of good, straight oak is worth more than its weight in silver. Houses are built of turf and stone because there is nothing else. Ships are patched with scavenged driftwood that is often rotten or worm-eaten before it even reaches the shore. But here is a cathedral of wealth. Leif walks up the beach to the tree line. He stops before a massive black spruce. It towers above him, straight as a mast, its bark rough and flaky, weeping beads of golden sap that glitter in the sunlight. He reaches out and touches it. The bark is warm. It feels alive under his palm, vibrating slightly with the wind that sighs through the canopy high above. He looks left, he looks right. The trees go on forever. There are thousands of them, millions. Tears prick at the eyes of the older men. This is not just scenery, this is survival. Every single one of these trunks is a potential keel, a house beam, a table, a cradle, a coffin. There is enough wood here to build a fleet that could conquer the world. There is enough charcoal to forge iron for 1,000 years. Leif draws his knife. He does not hack at the tree. He presses the blade gently into the wood. It sinks in with a satisfying resistance. He twists it, peeling back a strip of bark to reveal the creamy white flesh underneath. It smells sharp and clean. This is Markland, the woodland. The abundance is almost terrifying. In Greenland, every stick is counted and hoarded. Here, the forest is a spendthrift. Dead trees lie crisscrossed on the forest floor, rotting into the earth, wasted. To a Greenlander, this natural waste is shocking, almost sinful. The sheer scale of the resources forces a shift in their minds. They are no longer beggars on the edge of the world. They have found the treasury. They move among the trunks, patting them, measuring their girth with their arms. You can hear them whispering to each other, planning, dreaming. This one, a man murmurs, looking up at a tall fir. This one would make a fine centre post for a longhouse. And this, says another, kicking a fallen log, this would burn for a week. They are drunk on the possibilities. The forest surrounds them, indifferent to their greed, a silent, towering witness to their awe. But the beach is the edge of the known. To truly understand this new world, one must step inside. Leif signals for silence. The boisterous joy of the timber discovery fades. They are entering the domain of the unknown. They leave the bright, harsh light of the beach and step across the threshold of the tree line. Instantly, the world changes. The light drops away. The canopy overhead is so thick that the sun is reduced to shattered fragments, dappling the forest floor in pools of shifting gold and shadow. The temperature cools. The wind which whipped and tore at their cloaks on the beach is gone, replaced by a stillness that is heavy and watchful. Walk with them. Feel the change in the ground. On the beach the sand shifted and slid. On Helluland the rock was hard and unyielding. But here the ground is a sponge. They are walking on centuries of fallen needles, moss, and decaying wood. It is soft, springing back under their boots. It makes no sound. The heavy tread of 30 armed men is muffled, absorbed by the carpet of the forest. The silence is profound. It is not the empty silence of the ice, but a pregnant silence. The woods are listening. They move in single file, hands resting on the hilts of their swords. The undergrowth snags at their clothes. ferns that brush against their legs like wet fingers, brambles that catch and pull. The air is stagnant here, thick with the smell of sap and damp fungus. Leif stops. He holds up a hand. He listens. Far above in the unseen branches, a squirrel chatters, a sharp, scolding sound that makes the men jump. A bird calls, a lonely piping note that echoes through the wooden pillars. These sounds only emphasize the quiet. There is a feeling of being small here. On the ocean you are a speck on a flat plain, visible to the gods. In the forest you are hidden, you are blind. The trees block the line of sight. An enemy or a beast could be standing 10 paces away, perfectly camouflaged by the shadows and the brush. They find a clearing, a place where a great giant has fallen, tearing a hole in the canopy. Sunlight floods in, illuminating a patch of wild berries. Leif plucks one, a blueberry, small, dark, and dusted with a pale wax. He crushes it between his fingers, staining them purple. He tastes it. It is sweet, tart, and exploding with juice. It is a peace offering from the woods. But they do not go deep, not yet. The forest of Markland is too vast, too deep, too full of shadows. It stretches back into the continent for distances they cannot comprehend. It feels endless, a green ocean as dangerous and trackless as the blue one they just crossed. Leif turns back. He retraces his steps, following the scars their boots made in the moss. The men exhale as they step back out onto the beach, back into the reassuring brightness of the sun and the open view of the sea. They have seen the wealth of Markland, and they have felt its shadow. It is a land of riches, yes, but it is a land that keeps its secrets in the dark. The wind has lost its teeth. Can you feel the difference? For weeks the air has been an adversary, a biting, freezing force that sought to peel the skin from your face. But here, further south than any Norse ship has ever dared to venture, the wind has softened. It touches the cheek like a warm hand. We have left the stone deserts of Helluland and the dark, brooding forests of Markland behind. We have arrived at a place that feels forgiven. The ship drifts into a shallow sound. The water here is not the churning, violent grey of the open Atlantic. It is calm, lapping gently against the hull with a sound like a rhythmic hush. When the men step ashore, they do not step onto ice, nor onto the thick, suffocating carpet of pine needles. They step into the grass. It is tall, swaying grass, golden in the autumn sun, stretching out like a nobleman's field. But there is a magic here that defies the logic of the north. The Saga tells us that when the men first walked onto this land, the sun was shining bright and high. They bent down, their leather boots sinking into the earth, and touched the morning dew that clung to the blades of grass. They lifted their wet fingers to their lips. taste it. It is sweet, not the metallic taste of water stored in leather skins, but a pure, crystalline sweetness, like honey dissolved in rain. It is the taste of a land that does not know the cruelty of winter. And then they see them, wrapped around the trunks of the maple and oak trees, climbing in chaotic, joyful spirals, are vines. They are not the brambles of the north. They are thick, woody ropes that hang heavy with clusters of fruit. The men approach cautiously. To a Greenlander, a berry is a small tart thing, a crowberry or a blueberry, hard won from the frozen bog. But these are different. They are purple, almost black, dusted with a pale, waxy bloom. Some are pale green, translucent against the sun. Leif reaches out. He plucks a single fruit. The skin is taut. He crushes it between his teeth and it bursts. A rush of sugar and tart acid floods his mouth. It is a flavor of impossible richness. It is the taste of the sun, captured and liquefied. It is a promise that here in this strange new world, they will not merely survive, they will feast. Among the crew there is a man who does not look like the others. He is small, with a protruding forehead and restless, darting eyes. His face is a map of wrinkles, etched by a sun far different from the pale light of the north. This is Tyrker. He is a southerner, a German, captured or employed long ago by Eric the Red, and he has been a foster father to Leif since the boy was small enough to sit on his knee. As the crew sets up the initial camp, a panic begins to spread. Tyrker is missing. The sun is dipping low, casting long golden shadows across the meadows. Leif is furious, his heart hammering against his ribs. He gathers 12 men to search. They are about to plunge into the tree line, fearing wolves or Skrælings, or the unknown spirits of this land, when the bushes part. Tyrker emerges. He is not injured. He is not terrified. He is vibrating. He walks with a strange, stumbling gait, his arms wide open, his face split by a grin that shows all his teeth. He is looking at them, but he is not seeing them. His eyes are rolling, fixed on a memory. He begins to speak, but the words that tumble from his mouth are not the sharp, guttural Norse of the crew. They are soft, rolling sounds. Ich habe gefunden, Wein, die Reben. He is speaking German. He has reverted to the language of his childhood. He is drunk on nostalgia. The crew stares at him, bewildered, the silence of the meadow broken by this babble of a foreign tongue. Leif steps forward, gripping the old man's shoulders, shaking him gently. "Foster father," he whispers, "what are you saying? Where have you been?" Tyrker blinks. The fog of memory clears, and he sees Leif. He switches back to Norse, but his voice trembles with an emotion that is close to weeping. "I did not go much further than you," Tyrker says, his voice thick. "But I found something that you do not know. I found vines, and I found grapes." The men look at each other. Grapes, Vinber. To the Norse, wine is a luxury imported from the distant south, from the courts of kings in Francia or the Mediterranean. It is the drink of Christ and emperors. To find the raw material of wine growing wild, untended, hanging from the trees in a land at the edge of the world, it is a miracle. Turka holds out his hands. They are stained crimson with the juice. He smells of fermentation and sugar. It is true, he insists, seeing their doubt. I was born where there is no shortage of such things. In that moment, the land is christened. It is no longer just a shore. It is Vinland, the land of wine. The discovery shifts the very air around them. They are no longer exiles on a rock. They are the owners of a vineyard planted by the gods themselves. The euphoria of the grapes is a heady drug, but Leif is his father's son. He knows that sweetness does not build walls and juice does not keep out the cold. The days are growing shorter. The shadows are lengthening. Winter is coming, even to Vinland. They need a home. Leif turns his back on the vines and walks to the water's edge. He is looking for the Straumfjord, the fjord of currents. He needs a place that offers more than just fruit. He needs a fortress. He finds a bay where a river flows out into the sea. The geography here is perfect. There is a large lake upstream, feeding the river, which ensures fresh water that will not turn brackish. He watches the tide. It is drastic here. When the tide goes out, the river mouth becomes shallow, trapping fish in the pools. When it comes in, it lifts the ship high and safe. But it is what is in the water that decides it. Leif stands on the bank and watches the surface of the river. It is boiling. Great silver shapes are leaping from the water, fighting the current, flashing like drawn swords in the sunlight. Salmon, and not the small, scrappy salmon of the streams back home. These are monsters. They are longer than a man's arm, thick with muscle and fat. They are so plentiful that a man could almost walk across the river on their backs. Leif watches them struggle upstream, driven by the same instinct that drove him across the ocean. This is the sign. The grapes are a luxury. The salmon are life. With this river, the crew will never starve. They can smoke the fish, dry them, store them for the dark months. Here, Leif says, the word is soft, barely a whisper, but it stops the wandering of the crew. We will build here. They do not pitch tents. They bring the heavy iron axes from the ship. The sound of metal biting into wood rings out, a violent rhythmic percussion that scares the birds from the trees. They fell the great maples and oaks. They are building Búdir, permanent booths, houses with strong timber frames and roofs thatched with the golden grass of the meadows. This settlement, Leif's Búdir, is not a temporary camp. It is a claim. They dig the post holes deep into the soft earth. They lay the hearthstones with care. As the walls rise, cutting off the view of the endless horizon, the men begin to feel the first true relaxation they have known in months. They are enclosed. They are protected. Outside, the wind rattles the drying vines and the sea whispers against the shore. But inside the walls of Leifsbudir, the fire is lit. The smell of roasting salmon fills the air, mixing with the sweet, sticky scent of the grapes that are piled in the corner. The bay holds them in its cupped hands. The long voyage is paused. They have found the spot where the world wants them to stay. Stand with me now on the northernmost tip of the great northern peninsula. The air here is different from the sweet grape-scented breeze of the southern vines. Here, the wind has regained its edge. It sweeps across the Strait of Belle Isle, carrying the cold breath of the Arctic, whistling through the sedge and the tall grasses that bow in submission to its power. This is the place they chose. It is the gateway. Look at the shape of the land. It is not random. It is a shallow, curving bay, protected by a scattering of islands that break the fury of the open ocean. The water here is shallow, filled with the light of the sky, allowing the ships to be pulled up easily onto the shore. But look closer at the ground. Do you see the faint ghostly outlines in the earth? These are not the foundations of a fortress meant to stand for 1,000 years. They are the footprints of a visitor. The Norse did not come here to conquer this specific patch of bog and grass. They came to use it. It is a base camp, a way station between the timber-rich forests of Markland and the barren ice of Greenland. The site sits on a terrace, a flat shelf of land raised just above the high tide mark. A black stream winds through the peat bog nearby. Fresh, iron-rich water. Can you smell it? The scent of the bog is heavy and metallic. It smells of wet earth, of decaying moss, and of the iron ore, the myrmalm, that lies beneath the surface, waiting to be harvested. The settlement is arranged with a precision that speaks of discipline. There are no scattered huts. There are 3 distinct complexes, housing perhaps 90 souls. They stand in a line, facing the sea, watching the horizon. To walk here is to walk in a space of waiting. The land feels temporary, holding its breath, knowing that these strangers with their iron tools and their strange guttural language will not stay forever. They are ghosts in the making, leaving only the scars of their walls and the charcoal of their fires to whisper that they were ever here at all. The wind bites, and the days grow short. There is no time for idleness. The decision to winter here brings with it a crushing burden of labor. They cannot sleep under the sail. The North American winter would freeze the blood in their veins before morning. They must build, but they do not build with wood alone. Wood is precious. Wood is for ships and for fires. Here they build with the earth itself. Watch the men as they work. They take up their spades, rough tools of iron and wood, and they turn to the ground. Schluck, rip, schluck. It is the wet, tearing sound of the sod being cut. They are skinning the land. They cut the turf into thick, heavy blocks, entangled with the roots of the sedge grass, dripping with the dark moisture of the bog. It is exhausting, back-breaking work. A single block of wet turf is a heavy burden, a dead weight that strains the muscles of the lower back and roughens the palms. They pass them hand to hand, a chain of labour moving from the bog to the building site. The walls rise slowly. They are not thin barriers. They are 6 feet thick at the base, tapering as they rise. These are living walls. The grass roots are still woven through the soil, knitting the blocks together as they settle. The men lay them in a herringbone pattern, locking them tight against the wind. Imagine the smell of it. You're encased in the scent of raw, damp earth. It is like being buried alive, but in a way that promises life, not death. Inside the earthen walls they raise the timber frame. The sound of the axe echoes across the bay. Thwack, thwack, a sharp, violent intrusion into the quiet of the wilderness. They peel the bark from the spruce logs, leaving the wood pale and sticky with resin. They lash the beams together, creating the skeleton of the roof. And then the sod goes on top, layer upon layer of earth, weighing down the timbers, pressing the house into the ground. When it is finished, the longhouse does not look like a building standing on the landscape. It looks like a hill. It looks like the earth has swelled up to shelter them. It is camouflaged, low and hunchbacked against the wind. It is a masterpiece of insulation, a warm womb of soil created to withstand the howling fury of the coming storms. Winter arrives. The world outside the turf walls ceases to exist. It becomes a void of white noise, a screaming wind that scours the beach and piles snow against the sides of the longhouse until the building is nothing more than a mound in the drift. But inside, there is the Langeld, the long fire. Step through the low, heavy door. The sudden silence is shocking. The roar of the wind is instantly cut off, replaced by a muffled, distant moan. The air here is thick. It is warm, humid and hazy with blue smoke that drifts lazily up toward the smoke holes in the roof. The fire is the heart of the world. It runs down the center of the hall, a trench of glowing embers and dancing yellow flames. It feeds on the driftwood gathered from the shore and the peat cut from the bog. Listen to it. Snap, pop, hiss. The peat burns with a sweet, earthy incense, a heavy smoke that hangs low before escaping. It stings the eyes, making them water, but it is a welcome pain. It is the sting of heat. The crew is here. The 90 souls who crossed the ocean are packed into this earthen tunnel. They sit on the pult, the raised wooden platforms that run along the walls. This is where they eat, where they work, and where they sleep. The atmosphere is one of intimate shared survival. The light is low, flickering, casting long, jumping shadows against the turf walls. You can see the glint of gold on an arm ring, the flash of a knife whittling a piece of bone, the glow of a face leaning in to light a pipe. But mostly, you hear the sound of rest, the heavy rhythmic breathing of sleeping men, the soft rustle of a wool blanket being pulled tight, the quiet murmur of a story being told in the corner. Not a saga of war, but a memory of home, whispered so as not to wake the others. There is a profound sense of safety here. The walls of earth are 6 feet thick, the storm cannot touch them. The fire keeps the frost at bay. The men are wrapped in furs, bear, seal and wolf, creating a heap of hibernating humanity. The air smells of wood smoke, of drying leather, of unwashed bodies, and of roasted meat. It is a primal, comforting scent. In this dark, smoky burrow at the edge of the known world, time seems to stop. They are suspended in the amber of the firelight, waiting for the sun to return, dreaming of the green fjords of home, while the American winter howls in vain at the door. The silence of Vinland has, until now, been the silence of the uninhabited. It was the quiet of the trees talking only to the wind, and the river talking only to the stones. But today, the quality of that silence changes. It thickens. It becomes heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm charged with a static electricity that raises the fine hairs on the back of your neck. Leif and his men are working near the water, perhaps repairing a strake or salting the fish when the rhythm of the day stumbles. Look out at the bay. The water is a sheet of polished glass, reflecting the grey sky. Usually the only ripples come from the salmon or the diving birds, but today the surface is broken by a new geometry. Rounding the headland, silently, like shadows detaching themselves from the cliffs, come the boats. They are not the heavy wooden dragons of the Norse, clanking and groaning with the weight of oak and iron. These vessels are impossible things. They are skin boats. They sit low in the water, light as leaves, stitched together from the hides of seals or caribou over frames of bent wood. They are organic, translucent in the sun, pulsing with the movement of the sea. And in them are men. The Norse stop. The axe is lowered. The hammer is silenced. For the first time in the history of their expansion, the Vikings are frozen not by ice, but by the sheer, paralyzing shock of presence. They are not alone. The strangers stop too. They float there, suspended in the amber light of the morning, their paddles dripping water, plip, 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 into the bay. The distance between the shore and the boats is only 100 paces, but it is a chasm between two worlds that have been separated for 60,000 years. The men in the boats are waving staves, long poles that they rotate in the air with a strange, synchronized motion. It creates a sound like the wind in the straw, a threshing sound. Is it a threat? Is it a greeting? Leif does not know. He stands on the wet stones, his hand hovering near the hilt of his sword, but he does not draw it. He simply stares. The Skrælingar, the Norse will call them. It is a harsh name, a word that implies something shriveled or screeching, born of fear and confusion. But in this first moment there is no name. There is only the visceral shock of the other. The indigenous eyes are wide, dark, and unblinking, taking in the pale skin, the bushy beards, and the monstrous, hulking shape of the Norse ship. The universe has just doubled in size. The solitude of the Atlantic was a comfortable lie. The land has eyes, and right now, unblinking and ancient, those eyes are watching us. The tension breaks, not with an arrow, but with curiosity. The first encounter is not a battle, it is a market. The strangers come ashore. They step out of their skin boats with a fluid grace, their feet quiet on the rocks where the Norse boots clatter and crunch. They are smaller than the Northmen, lithe and wired with a different kind of strength. They smell of wood smoke, tanned leather, and the musk of the deep forest. They do not want iron. They recoil from the weapons, the heavy spears and the biting axes. They do not understand the milk the Norse offer, spitting it out with suspicion. What they want is red cloth. Leif has bolts of it in the ship's hold, heavy, woven wool dyed in the crimson vats of Norway or the British Isles. To the Norse, it is common trade goods. To the visitors, it is magic. They stare at the fabric as if it were a piece of the sun itself. Red is the colour of blood, of life, of fire. To hold a piece of this vibrant, impossible colour is to hold power. The trade begins. It is a silent, intense negotiation of gestures. A Norseman holds out a strip of the red wool. The indigenous man steps forward, his eyes locked on the colour. In exchange, he offers a bundle of furs. Touch them. These are not the rough sheepskins of Greenland. These are sable, marten, grey squirrel. Run your thumb against the grain. The fur is impossibly soft, dense and oily. It is wealth beyond measure. In the markets of Europe, kings would pay a chest of silver for such a pelt to line their cloaks. Here it is traded for a span of red wool the length of a man's finger. As the supply of cloth dwindles, the Norse grow cunning. They tear the strips smaller and smaller until they are trading pieces no wider than a knuckle. And still the trade continues. The visitors bind the red scraps around their heads with delight, wearing them like crowns of fire. For an hour there is peace. It is a peace built on the fragile bridge of commerce. The air smells of unwashed wool and curing hides. There is the low murmur of voices testing the shapes of foreign words. Hands brush against hands. The rough calloused palm of the sailor meeting the smooth, darker skin of the hunter. In this exchange for a fleeting heartbeat, the fear is forgotten, replaced by the universal language of desire. I have what you want, and you have what I need. But the peace is as thin as the skin of the boats. It is a bubble waiting to burst. The realization comes slowly, then all at once. It is not triggered by a warrior, but by a beast. The Norse have brought cattle with them. A bull, massive, shaggy, and ill-tempered from the voyage. It has been grazing in the long grass behind the settlement. Suddenly, the bull emerges from the tree line. It sees the strangers, the unfamiliar scent, the quick movements, and it lowers its massive head. It bellows. The sound is a guttural, earth-shaking roar that tears through the quiet of the exchange. To the Norse, it is a farm sound. To the indigenous people, who have never seen a cow, let alone a bull, it is the scream of a monster. Panic erupts. The fragile web of trust snaps instantly. The visitors scramble for their boats, tumbling over each other in their haste to escape the roaring beast. They push off into the bay, paddling furiously, their eyes wide with terror, vanishing back around the headland as quickly as they appeared. Silence rushes back in, but it is different now. It is the silence of a drawn breath. Leif watches them go, and the weight of the situation settles on him like a stone cloak. He looks at his 90 men. Then he looks at the endless, brooding tree line where the strangers came from. He realizes the math of their survival. In Greenland, the Norse are masters of the empty rock. But here they are a drop of oil in an ocean of water. The Skrælingar are not just a few wandering hunters. They are a civilization. They know every rock, every current, every hiding place in the forest. They are the immune system of this land, and the Norse are the infection. The trade of the red cloth was a distraction. The real exchange was the information gathered by the eyes. The Norse saw furs. The Skrælings saw invaders. The walls of the settlement suddenly feel very low. The palisade fence looks like a toy. Leif realizes that the vastness of Vinland, which days ago felt like a blessing of timber and grapes, is actually a trap. They cannot farm here. They cannot wander into the woods alone to relieve themselves. They will never sleep soundly again. The boundary has been drawn. It is not a line on a map. It is a line of fear. They have discovered the edge of their expansion. They can sail the ocean. They can weather the storm. They can survive the hunger. But they cannot fight the sheer, overwhelming weight of a land that is already owned. The shiver that runs through the camp that night is not from the cold. It is the chill of being watched by 1,000 unseen eyes in the dark. The time for leaving does not come with a shout, but with a change in the wind. The spring has arrived, softening the bite of the air, but for the crew of Leif Erikson, the season does not mean planting, it means sailing. The decision hangs in the air, heavy and undeniable. Vinland is a paradise, yes, a land of sweet dew and salmon rivers, but it is a paradise that feels borrowed. The eyes in the woods are watching. The silence of the forest is too deep, too knowing. They are strangers here, and strangers must eventually go home. The loading of the ship is a solemn act of gluttony. The Nor, once light and bobbing in the shallow bay, begins to sink lower and lower into the water. They are not filling it with stones for ballast this time. They are filling it with wealth. Watch them carry the timber. These are not the twisted, stunted birches of the Greenland valleys. These are the giants of Markland, logs of spruce and fir, felled and stripped of their bark, weeping, sticky, golden resin. The men heave them onto their shoulders, grunting under the weight. Thud, thud, thud. The logs are stacked in the hold, interlocking like the fingers of a miser. This wood is more precious than silver. It is the promise of new roofs, new ships, and hot fires in the frozen north. And then the towboat. It is filled with the harvest of the vines. The grapes have been dried over the winter, shriveled into dark, sweet jewels, raisins, or pressed into casks that smell of fermentation and wild sugar. They are the taste of a summer that Greenland will never know. When the final cask is lashed down, the ship sits dangerously low. The gunwales are only a few feet above the waterline. It is a fat, heavy beast, pregnant with the spoils of the New World. Leif stands alone in the doorway of the longhouse. The fire in the central hearth has been extinguished. The ash is cold. The silence has already rushed back in to reclaim the space. He runs his hand along the turf wall, feeling the damp roots of the grass. He leaves the door unlatched. There is no need to lock it. Who would rob this house? The bears, the ghosts, or the Skrælingar, who will perhaps walk through these rooms when the ships are gone, wondering at the strange, earth-burrowing habits of the pale men. He turns his back. He walks down to the water and climbs aboard. There is no fanfare. The oars dip into the glassy water. Splash, drip, splash, and the Nor pulls away from the shore. They do not look back until they reach the mouth of the bay. Then, just for a moment, they see the mound of the longhouse, a small, unnatural bump in the green meadow, slowly being swallowed by the distance. The smoke is gone. The voices are gone. Vinland is returned to the wild. The Atlantic is a jealous road. It does not like to see travellers pass with such heavy pockets. The journey north and east is slow. The Nor ploughs through the waves rather than riding over them, its belly full of heavy timber. The wind is behind them, the byre, the fair wind pushing them home. They are nearing the coast of Greenland. The jagged teeth of the glaciers are visible on the horizon, glowing white against the steel-grey sky. It is here, in the treacherous waters just off the coast, that Leif earns the name that will follow him through history. He is at the steering oar, his eyes scanning the water. The crew sees only the waves and the spray. But Leif sees something else. He sees a break in the rhythm. "Bear off," he commands, his voice cutting through the wind. "Stand into the wind," the crew grumbles. They are tired. They smell the smoke of their own hearths. Why turn aside now? But they obey. The great sail is hauled in, the ship leans, and they cut a new path toward a dark shape rising from the foam. It is a scary, a lonely, jagged reef of rock that barely breaks the surface of the high tide. As they draw closer, the shape resolves into tragedy. There is the skeleton of a ship, its timbers smashed and splintered against the unforgiving stone, and clinging to the highest point of the rock, huddled together like seabirds in a storm, are men, 15 of them. They are the crew of a trading ship, led by a man named Thorir, wrecked and left to die within sight of the land they sought. They are wet, freezing, and their skin is grey with the touch of hypothermia. Can you imagine the sound of their salvation? It is the creak of Leif's ship looming over them. It is the heavy thud of a rope landing on the wet rock. Leif does not hesitate, despite his own ship being dangerously overladen with timber. He stops. He takes them all. He takes as much of their cargo as he can fit, stacking the rescued goods on top of the Vinland wood until the deck is a maze of crates and bales. He pulls Thorir from the rock, grasping his hand, a warm, living hand gripping a cold, dying one. In the Norse mind, this is not merely charity, it is hamingja, luck. But luck is not random chance to them. It is a force, a reservoir of spiritual power that belongs to a leader. To find a new world is skill. To stumble upon 15 lost souls and save them is luck. It is a sign that the gods are smiling on him as the overloaded ship finally limps into the fjord of Eriksfjord. Sitting so low, the water laps at the oar holes. The whisper begins. It starts among the rescued men, shivering in their blankets. It spreads to the crew of the Nor. By the time the keel scrapes the gravel of Brattahlíð, the name is forged. He is no longer just Leif, son of Erik. He is Leif the Lucky, the man who finds land, the man who finds wealth, the man who saves lives. He has mastered the ocean. The return to Brattahlíð is a collision of worlds. Leif steps off the ship, smelling of wild grapes and resinous pine, and walks into the stench of seal oil and burning peat. He brings the colour of the south into the monochrome of the north. He stands in his father's hall. Erik the Red is old now, his beard white as the glacier, his legs stiff. He sits in the high seat listening. Leif pours the wine. the strange sweet wine of the West into a horn and hands it to his father. The story is told, but notice how it is told. It is not shouted from the rooftops. It is shared in the low murmuring tones of the winter nights, when the blizzard howls outside and the darkness presses against the turf walls. The men speak of the wonder strands, the endless beaches of sand. They speak of the salmon that leap into your hands. They speak of the frost-free grass. The listeners lean in, their eyes wide, reflecting the firelight. To a people living on the knife edge of survival, scraping a living from the ice, the description of Vinland sounds like a fever dream. It sounds like Valhalla without the dying, but even as the story is told, it begins to drift. It becomes a whisper. Leif never returns. His father dies, and Leif takes the mantle of leadership in Greenland. The weight of the chieftainship anchors him to the rock. He sends others, his brothers Thorvald and Thorstein, his sister Freydis, but he himself never sees the vines again. The settlement at Leifsbudir is used for a few years, a temporary base for cutting timber, but the fear of the Skrælings, the distance and the sheer impossibility of the voyage turn the enterprise into a memory rather than a colony. The timber of Vinland builds the cathedral at Garda. The grapes of Vinland sweeten the feasts of one winter, but the land itself fades. It does not become a kingdom, it becomes a saga. The story is preserved not in maps, but in the rhythm of the voice. It is passed from tongue to ear, smoothed and polished like a stone in the river of time. The details blur, the geography becomes vague. Vinland the good, it hangs there in the west just over the horizon, a tantalizing ghost. It is an unspoken promise that the Norse spirit could not quite keep. They touched the edge of a continent, held its riches in their hands, and then let it slip away. The ocean was too wide, the winter too long, the unknown too vast. And so the great longship glides into the mist, and the voyage comes to its quiet end. We gently turn the final brittle page, feeling the texture of the paper one last time, and slowly close the heavy cover. Thump, the book returns to its rest, and the dust motes dance slowly in the dying light of the fire. You are safe now. The ocean is calm. The world outside has faded away entirely, leaving only the warmth of this room and the heaviness of your eyelids. If you wish to find your way back to this sanctuary tomorrow, please subscribe and leave a quiet like to keep the candles burning. Sleep now, let go of the oars, and drift. Sleep, sleep, good night.